This continent was still full of mysteries and powers, sure to be packed with dangers beyond what they had encountered so far in their travels. The future of the young boy and girl was sure to be filled with new memories as they got to experience the wider world. This is the final sentence that refers to the artwork and the story of the final Albaz lore card, New Frontier. It was released in the latest valuable book, the main source of truth for all Yu-Gi-Oh! Lore, released annually. The valuable books have official text written in them by the game's designers and storytellers. However brief, it still gives a good enough outline to what is actually the story the game makers are trying to tell, using artwork, card names, and card effects. Following the release and the reveals of new cards depicting pieces of the Albaz lore that were released after Cyberstorm Access, which officially was the last lore set for Albaz, we are starting to get a bigger picture of what the next chapter of the Albaz storyline may be. And with the promise of a future for the young boy and girl and experiencing the wider world, Konami has pretty much hinted that this story will have a sequel. But what can that sequel be? Let's discuss. There are 5 cards that depict an image that occurs after the conclusion of the Great War. As the war officially ends with Luluwalilith, Shrek, and Albion defeating the Bestial Dispatter, and Aluber's realization that the battle has been lost, there are still some cards that depict events that follow that ending. Ice Jade ran Adrian, Guiding Quem the Virtuous, Fallen of Argyros, the Bestial Aluber, and New Frontier. And now we have more material for each of these being revealed slowly throughout the following sets, with Millennium Century Ice Prison, Blink Out, and Rumpel Teufel, meaning that there could also be 2 or more cards depicting Quem, Ecclesia, and Albaz in the future. But let's break down what we already know from the releases we do have available. Days and months have gone by since the Allied forces managed to overturn an impossible war and achieve victory in the Great War. However, the scars of war carved in the Northern attested to the size of the losses that incurred. Even still, those that were wounded, those that had remained, and everyone else kept facing forward, choosing to move towards the future. The new Empress of Ice sealed her sworn enemy, locking him in a lonely cradle. The mother Zoa, sleeping in the further depths of the Ice Jade Cenote, shut all of the sacred summit in cold ice, much like the heart of Adrian, solidly and firmly so it won't crumble ever again. The new Empress of Ice, Adrian, has managed to seal her sworn enemy who has eradicated her kind. Longyuan, turning into an evil dragon in the midst of the battle in the summit, was defeated. Adrian, taking the place and the throne that once belonged to Cosmoclore, has sealed the Ice Jade Cavern inside the Sword Soul Summit in a thick layer of ice to shut it off from the outside, so that it may never again crumble like it once did. In the background of Ren Adrian's artwork, you can actually see the face of Longyuan in his Abyss Dragon form, now frozen in ice. It is a testament of how gigantic it actually is, and how strong Adrian was to defeat it. In the foreground, we can also see the broken remains of what is possibly Cosmoclore, or another Ice Jade creature, missing its limbs, a relic of the devastation that took place in the summit during the Great War. Now Longyuan being frozen in ice could actually open up a door to a future storyline. In the art of Million Century Ice Prison, a card that released in Duelist Nexus, officially an out-of-lore card, we get to see a different angle of what happens in the Ice Jade Kingdom at the moment. We see Adrian in the foreground, but in the background we get a full picture of the Abyss form of Longyuan fused with the Serpent of Golgonda, looking as if it's trying to burst or break out of its ice prison. As mentioned, the card name Million Century is definitely a long time, but the fact that the prison is made of ice, a material that at the end of the day can easily melt or break, could mean that it could eventually give out and release the frozen Longyuan that is inside it. In which case, it can either become an all-new villain, or at least one of the villains that will try to take over the entire continent, or perhaps it could actually merge or unite with the Ice Jades, turning into a new Ice Dragon Lord infused with Ice Jade magic and Sword Soul power. It was an unexpected yet inevitable birth. This entity had no memories, yet that was only reasonable. The energy unleashed by the sprites in the Great Sea Sand took the remains of Albalos and its vessel and gave birth to a single persona. An unwelcome byproduct of the Argyro system, which had no progenitors, yet possessed a will of its own, began marching almost as if guided by something. The Fallen of Argyros is a unique being. Judging by the lore, it is a standalone being, adorning Albaz's outer shell, with sprite energy making up its insides. It was apparently created by the Argyro system almost as a mistake, a glitch. It's a combination that was not meant to happen, but eventually it did. And as the lore mentioned, it might be guided by something. In the artwork of Blink Out, a new card depicting Fallen of Argyros that is being released in Legacy of Destruction, we see the Fallen of Argyros standing over a pile of defeated Therions in the middle of the destroyed Colosseum. So, why would Fallen of Argyros return here? What does he even know about this place, and what sort of connection does he have with the land of Iron the Colosseum is in? The Argyro system, being the system that is responsible for running the Colosseum, was defeated by Regulus, Sargas, and Kit during the war. After Sargas defeated all Therion combatants in the arena, the Argyro system, in a last-ditch effort, released the sprites to protect its remains. Those were also eventually defeated by Sargas and Regulus in the art of Sprite Double Cross, and when Kit captured the remaining sprite energy with Sprite Sprint. The Fallen of Argyros, now essentially containing the only remains of what was the Argyro system, some sprite energy cuddled up inside a piece of armor, is drawn back into the Colosseum, possibly guided by the spirit of the Argyro system still somewhere in the universe. As it stands over a pile of defeated Therions, we have to wonder, is he planning to use the stored energy to revive them, power back up the Argyro system itself, create more sprite energy, more Therion combatants, or even maybe something new, something that combines all of them? As one would expect of Ganua, the city once ruled by iron and arts, the coming of yet another interesting incident. A story that follows the script perfectly is truly the dullest thing. I guess I'll keep an eye on what role the world is reserving for this newborn Fallen. No matter what fate has in store, I hold the seed of miracles. Pretty jarring translation, but one that makes sense considering the overarching story. Aluber, as he descended from the hole over the abyss, came from a different reality, a different world, a world or city that is now confirmed to be named Ganua. This could also be a part of the world where the Bestials came from, a city ruled by iron and arts. Could also refer to the theatrical nature of what ended up being the Despians. But Ganua actually has a real-world reference. Ganua is a mythical city in the work of William Blake, an 18th century English poet, painter, and printmaker. William Blake, funnily enough, is a great inspiration for the entire Albaz lore in general. He is the one who wrote of the 4 Zoas that are also depicted in his paintings and in some artworks of the Albaz story itself. In his fictional world of mythology, there are many parallel lines to the Albaz lore, including Los, the fallen form of Urthonda, one of the 4 Zoas, and also Albion itself, which is the name of the primordial man in William Blake's world. This is super interesting as a subject that we can discuss, which could also lead to other revelations of future storylines, but now let's get back to Aluber's story. Now, it's important to establish why Aluber came into the Abyss in the first place. Aluber was always after the red gem, now known as the Seed of Miracles. This is the only thing it was after this entire time. Granted, we didn't even know this seed existed until seeing it being held by Cartesia, but apparently this seed is the key to understanding Aluber's motivations in this story. At the end of the war, in Etude of the Branded, we see Ad Libitum kneeling in defeat or in admiration in front of his master Aluber, now in his almost final form with dragon horns and bestial wings on his back. Aluber then takes his throne without his mask, contemplating his actions while holding on to the Seed of Miracles, planning his next move. The name of the new card is commonly known as Rumpelteufel, but translated specifically from German, it roughly means something like rumbling devil, or known otherwise as the laughing goat. But in the art of Rumpelteufel, all we see is an empty throne and Aluber's horned mask. But where's the seed of miracles and where is Aluber? One theory can suggest that Aluber has finally figured out what he needs to do with the seed and left from wherever he was to his new destination. It also raises the question of where Aluber was in the art of the bestial Aluber. Was he back home, or was he still somewhere in the land of the abyss? Could he have now taken the seed of miracles back to his land of origin, Ganua, to finally get to work on what he originally planned to do with the seed all along? A girl walked alone the path ruined by the disturbance, uttering words and turning around, almost as if she was traveling along with someone else. After sinking the soul of Fleur-de-Lis to the lowest parts of the depths once again, Quem, who became the unifier of the virtuous Vestals, no longer had her lonesome expression and turned her back on the great nation that has lost its glory. Now, Quem did take a part in the main story, even though it was only introduced after its conclusion. Quem was the one responsible for the resurrection of Fleur-de-Lis, infusing her with the powers of the Despia, eventually leading to the victory in the Great War. But what are Quem's intentions moving forward? Where is she headed? And more importantly, who even is she? As we know, Quem is not Cartesia nor Ecclesia, she is her own being. It is a Despia, but also a Dogmatica, an impossible duality that remains uniquely hers and hers alone when it comes to cards within the lore. I don't have a clear understanding of what Quem's role could be in the future, but I only have one thought. Quem, being this enigmatic being that could revive and infuse beings with certain powers, could actually now be a new villain in the next story. She could possibly give life to a new army of the dead, whether it is the fallen Dogmatica forces or even the bestials that have also perished in the Great War. She could give life to a new type of enemy that we're still not aware of. The scars of war hadn't healed, and the resentments still lingered. However, the survivors of the Tri-Brigade and the reformed Dogmatica Knights made peace, as people moved towards rebuilding and starting a new page. Meanwhile, the young boy and girl had been making their preparations and finally resolved to depart on a journey. A journey to take back what was beloved to them. This continent was still full of mysteries and powers, sure to be packed with dangers beyond what they had encountered so far in their travels. The future of the young boy and girl was sure to be filled with new memories as they got to experience the wider world. The extinction of the great northern nation of Dogmatica, which has left its name in history in what would later be named as the Golgonda War, was but a mere foreword to a greater war that would eventually involve the entire continent. Some were in anguish about the defiled land left behind, while others decided it is time to step out from the shadows and into the forefront. The pulse of a great power always begat new conflict, and whether people of this world wished for it or not, the times continue to move forward into ever more chaos. Now, this is much easier to analyze. It almost tells us exactly what is meant to happen. The Dogmatica and Tri-Brigade, the nations that were both at war for decades, are now at peace. The Dogmatica, being reformed from their previously religious way of life, is now but a united force of knights that will fight alongside the Tri-Brigade in the foreseeable future. The survivors of both clans must unite for the protection of what remains of their land now that they are fewer in numbers. The northern part of the continent, Dogmatica, is now quote-unquote extinct, as the Great War took its toll upon the land, and with the great hole that is opened in the middle of it, it is no longer habitable. The newly formed tribes now live in a great colony in the Golgonda Desert, in the parts that were once the Tri-Brigades now shared with their allies. Now, as the text mentions, the echoes of war have made some new players step out of the shadows and into the forefront. There are more people, more tribes, more power in this continent outside of just the land of Dogmatica, the Sword Soul, and the land of Iron. There are still parts of the world that have not been explored, and now With more forces clamoring for an all-out war, it is up to Albaz and Ecclesia to find them and learn about them. This could be what Albaz and Ecclesia do on their journey. As they encounter new parts of the world, we will learn through their eyes what forces are in play, which new factions live amongst them, and who will be the great heroes and villains of the next part of the story. Thank you for watching this analysis of the possible future of the Albaz storyline. If you liked it, please consider subscribing or even becoming a member to help support me in making more of these types of videos in the future. If you haven't done it yet, make sure to check out the full Albaz movie and of course the newly released cinematic movie for the Visa Starfrost lore with real-life anime actors dubbing your favorite characters. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.